This is Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. All right, guys, we got a very special guest on the podcast today. This is the guy that I have probably mentioned the most on this podcast in terms of preachers that I've listened to, and I am so excited to bring an interview with him to you guys, and that is with the one, the only Matt Chandler. So as I told you guys from the very beginning of this podcast, back in 2017, Matt Chandler has been like my dude. And so I've listened to every single one of the sermons that he has preached from the Village Church stage since 2009, maybe 2008, 2009. And so his books, his preaching, and the things that he has done in ministry have had a profound impact on me. And just recently, this spring, he's become a buddy of mine. And so Joby Martin's good friends with him. And so he introduced me to him because he's got a new book coming out. And I went down to Dallas and I got to train some jiu-jitsu with him. And we just became fast friends. So we've broken bread together. We spent a good amount of time together. And we've got some more stuff, that I can't talk about right now that we'll be doing here in the very near future. That'll be amazing and awesome. But for those of you that don't know who in the world I'm talking about, he is a preacher, he's a pastor, he's an author. He is the senior pastor of the Village Church in Texas. He has been so since 2002. He's also the executive director of the board of the Acts 29 Church Network. So he has authored a bunch of different books. But my favorite of the books that he's written is the Explicit Gospel. So we have the 100 books every modern Christian man should read list on our website. It's Undaunted.Life/book list. And the Explicit Gospel is right there in the Christian section. He's also written a book called Take Heart, and he's got a new book out that is out now. If you're listening to this on time, it's called The Overcomers, God's Vision for You to Thrive in an Age of Anxiety and Outrage. And so the cool thing about this is I was down at the Acts 29 conference, and so we got to hang out and, got to get to know each other a little bit more. And, it was all kinds of fun. But then we actually filmed this interview at his house. Okay. So he's got like a little shop and, he's got a place where he does his work or all that. So we just set up right there. And so we talked for nearly 2 hours. And so as opposed to just dumping it all out there to you with all the different subject matters, I decided to break it up into 2 parts. So this is part 1 today. So we spent a good amount of time at the very beginning of this conversation talking about jiu-jitsu. Because he's almost 50 years old, and a year or 2 ago, he just was like, okay, let's start learning murder yoga. Like, that seems like it'd be a tremendous use of my time. And so we really dig into that because, as guys age, they tend to get into things like golf or I'm trying to think of anything else, but if it's like a physical activity, it's usually something like that. It's kind of leisurely. You can drink the entire time you're doing it. Like, you don't have to be athletic at all. You don't have to be in shape at all, but you just, I'm just going to start walking or something like that. But he decided to get into jiu-jitsu. Something that I feel like getting into it at the age of 30 that I got in too late. But, he's like, no, we're going to full send it in my late 40s and get into this. And guys, when I tell you he's into it, he is into it. Like, this isn't just something that he does for Instagram. This guy trains all the time. He trains at Double Five down in Dallas with Rafael Formiga. And I mean, it's a legit school. He competes. Like, it's really a different level with him. So we really break into that subject matter quite a bit. But we also talk about the Acts 29 conference. We talk about the sermon that he presented at the very end of the conference because Joby led off the conference. And then you had John Piper there in the middle. And then we have Matt Chandler close it out because it was very fiery. Right. And it was very direct and he was calling some people out, but he was also trying to burn off some stuff in some people that were in the room. And it was very forward. It was very much so my style, maybe not everyone else's style, but it was just very interesting, the different high points that he hit in that sermon. So we talk about other things as well in this part 1, and then we'll get to part 2 later on this week. But guys, I'm so excited to bring this to you. It's a long time coming. He's actually the very first person to deny me an interview request. So it wasn't even him, but like a long time ago, he was releasing a book and I was like, hey, I'd love to have you on the show. This was whenever I was still recording in a closet, in a different part of my house. And like didn't have video or anything like that. But his staff was basically like, yeah, he's basically too busy. So I kind of feel like this is coming full circle here a little bit. He was the first person to like let me down, like, dadgummit, I really wanted to talk to him on my show. And now here he is for a 2-parter and we're going to be doing more stuff here soon. So guys, without further ado, let's get into it. So Matt Chandler, normally I would say, welcome to Undaunted.Life, a man's podcast, but we're currently in your bunker, I think is what this is. This is like where you
should have seen it before we redid it.
Okay, so when did you redo it and what did you do?
So it was a COVID learning for me that I don't have any space at home to work. So I would be at the kitchen island. My wife it's just like a little French farmhouse over there, bro. And it's like open concept. And so I'm like, working from the kitchen island going, turn that off, be quiet. Just got headphones on and working. In fact, I wrote this at my book at the kitchen island. I say in the acknowledgments, hey, thank you, family. Thank you for that year.
Right.
That I was like, turn that down, get that off, And so this had been just the only space in the house that we hadn't redone. We bought it, and it was a guy that owns like a ninja training school or something, like the games. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. And it was I don't know what to call it. It was a disaster. Like and maybe you would love this. Maybe your listeners would love it. But there was a pull-up bar in the master bath where he liked to rep it out before. So it's needless to say, this was a single man.
In between bowel movements, knock out a few
you
sets
could
of
take a
pull-ups.
dump. Work some, not kipping pull-ups, but like real pull-ups.
No, like real man pull-ups.
And then take a shower. So Lauren gutted that, but we ran out of cheddar. So this was, maybe I'll show you a picture after this. It was purple carpet up the walls.
Like, and you decided that wasn't like the look
well,
you
what
wanted to
this
go with?
was, is it was a place that if my son or daughter wanted to have 6 friends spend the night, we'd be like, absolutely, above the garage.
Go to the purple carpet
So there were
room.
holes in these walls. There were there's a little, I don't think people see it, but there's a little like crow's nest up there, and they would put the bed mattress down and jump off on. They loved it. And I just said, well, it's mine now.
Okay.
And so we gutted this place. And so I've just had this like a year. I've just had this for a year.
Now, I kind of walked around a little bit. I have not seen any pull-up bars around here. So you're like anti-pull-ups?
No. I'll go to the garage. I got a jiu-jitsu mat and all sorts of weights in the garage.
Okay, so that's actually the first thing I want to talk about is jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Because technically, the first time you and I connected was over jiu-jitsu. Because we were connecting on Instagram a little bit, and then our mutual friend Joby Martin connected us, and we did this awesome event at your academy, which was Jesus and Jiu-Jitsu. So shout out to those guys.
They're amazing.
And so Rafael Formiga was doing like a seminar, and then you were speaking, and then it was just kind of an open mat thing, and there were like 150 people there, which was like amazing. Wild. And so here's the thing that I don't quite understand, because I started doing jiu-jitsu at the age of 30. And so I played every ball sport you could play, and I had done everything that could be done on a ball field. And so then it's like, hey, how about we just burn the ships and start like grappling, right? And so like doing full on like jiu-jitsu classes and all that. But as a pastor, like successful author, like you got, kids that are teenagers, one that's married and gone away, like of all the hobbies, like the one that like hits the cross section of like middle America, well, not middle America, but like suburbs of Dallas.
Sure.
It's golf. Like that's what you need to go do. You need to just overpay for clubs that don't actually make you better.
Sure.
Get a bunch of like shirts that are awkwardly colored and go out to play for 6 or 7 hours a time every time. But instead you chose like, learning how to fold clothes with people still inside of them. You
the
like
gentle
explain that.
art.
Yeah, gentle art.
Gentle art.
Dude, it's a lie. So anyone listening to this, it's not gentle. There's
nothing about it that's gentle.
Right.
In fact, I've still got to be gentle with this right arm. So I've just I'll be using, I'm fine. But
so why that of all the available hobbies?
Two things. One, I'd heard Clint Eastwood talk about this idea of not letting the old man in. And I just thought that was freaking cool. Like, I don't want to let the old man in. And then I had a son whose girlfriend's dad is a black belt in jiu-jitsu. Okay. And he was in my son's ear. He was like, man, you'd be perfect for this. You're long, surprisingly strong. You get leverage. You'd be a killer in jiu-jitsu. Right. So my son, he loves UFC, loves MMA. He loves it. And so we were at lunch with this guy, Reed and I were, and he just said, I know this is going to sound crazy, but this guy who's like a 9-time world champion, like in the jiu-jitsu world, like he's the stuff. He's the guy. His gym is in Highland Village. And so Reed at lunch was just like, can we do that? And I was thinking, I'm too old for that. I'll get hurt doing that. And I was like, oh crap, I'm letting the old man in.
It's the old man.
And so I was like, let's go do it, Reed. And so, bro, and the way, Formiga is a very Brazilian way of doing it. So we go, they give us a gi. Mine does not fit me. I mean, they don't have 6'5", 220 gis laying around. So, I mean, the gi, it's like just barely, I'll show you a picture of this, like barely below my knee. Yeah. So nobody's going to be Toriando and me that night unless they grab the ankles. Yeah. That's right. And I go in and, I mean, there's no, like, it's a beginner level class. And you got to do 40 of those before you can go to the all-level gi class. And so I'm in beginner class. There's a guy named Trevor there. He's become a friend. He's got gauges, a green mohawk, a freaking tat on his neck. He just looks like a guy you wouldn't want to tussle with.
Sure.
And so Formiga shows us one thing. I mean, he's like, here's how you escape guard, or this is a way to escape guard. And then, okay, let's go. Matt, Trevor. And I was like, holy, I mean, Trevor's like 240 pounds. He just looked like a bad man. And so you had to start, like I had to start in his guard. And so I don't know what happened to me that night, but I was like, I want to do this for the rest of my life. And I'd been coached well going into it, which is you need to get used to getting smashed.
Right.
And here I am, a blue belt, and it's still, I mean, gosh, we rolled. That was awful and awesome.
Okay. But here's the thing so the biggest ego check you can get as a successful man that I know of that is easily accessible and on just about every street corner in America now is a jiu-jitsu gym.
No question.
And the reason is because like luckily I have a lot of guys in my life that are really successful.
Yeah.
Successful in business. They've got good families. They've done well for themselves.
Yeah.
None of that matters in jiu-jitsu. Like your bottom line, your net worth, all that doesn't really come into account whenever there's somebody like laying on top of you and not letting you up.
That's right.
And the thing about it is I can put it this way. I'm a 4-stripe purple belt, right? So I'm like, which means I'm decent.
That's a flex. I mean, it's a flex.
But it's decent. That means like you're probably not going to get whooped in a street fight unless the other guy trains too.
That's true.
Or unless he's like Bob Sapp from back in the day where he's 400 pounds with an 8-pack, like one of those things. But when you get into a situation to where you're like, I got mauled for about 5 or 6 years before I felt like, okay, I might be kind of dangerous. Okay. Like what other thing can you do?
So you're saying I've got 3 or 4 years before I feel dangerous.
Like, so, cause I'll talk to white belts, Matt. I know you just got your blue and like, that's like a big step. But the biggest gap for most people is from blue to purple. Yeah. Because like some guys will get their blue belt and then they're like, oh, I'm good. And then they'll go back to golf or go back to, just video games or whatever. And they just kind of leave. They get the blue belt blues. But the thing about it is the whole time you're at blue belt, you still suck. Yeah. Even if you're good, you still suck.
Yeah. There's no question. I know.
Right. Well, it's because it's like a legitimate purple, brown, or black belt is going to be able to toy with you.
Oh, and that's the way I feel right now in training. I'm just being toyed with. Now they let me work. It's such a great gym. They let me work, but don't let me. So, which is perfect. And then every once in a while, I think because I'm 6'5", 220, Formiga won't feed me the new white belts, but every once in a while he'll give me one.
Right.
And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got a little offense. I don't ever have offense when I'm rolling against the purples, browns, and blacks. I mean, I think I do, but they use what I know against me. So they'll set me up by, I know he's a blue belt, so he's going to go, I'm going to make him think he can have my back. And next thing I know, I've been folded in half.
Right. And the thing that you don't realize, which I learned at blue belt, but you don't realize when you're rolling with all these guys that are better than you and dominating you that you're also getting better. So one of the most formative things that I've ever experienced in jiu-jitsu, because the advice I give to people is like, well, if you're not training, train. That's number one. Second is if you're training, tap early, tap often. I spent 4 or 5 years trying to prove to people how tough I was by not tapping until the last second, right? And get my neck just destroyed and cranked on. So don't do that. That's some aggro knuckle dragger crap. Don't do that. But I had a bad practice. I think I'd just gotten my blue belt. So I was where you're at and had a bad practice. Like when I was looking around for the nails, I realized that, it's only hammers. I'm the nail, right? One of those things. So I get to the locker room and I'm brooding, right? Because, I'm a better athlete than these guys and I'm stronger than these guys. And I just got blah, blah, blah. And one of our guys, he was a brown belt at the time, one of our world champions, Tyler Murrah, shout out Tyler Murrah, Scrap City Jiu-Jitsu in Midwest City, Oklahoma. He actually got his black belt from Marcus Adelante, who's down here in Dallas. And so a lot of you guys should know him. Anyway, he's a brown belt. He comes into the locker room after me and he doesn't say much. He's just not that type of guy. He's not a verbose guy. He sees me brooding, acting like a child. And he goes, hey, Kyle, what's going on? You all right? I'm like, man, I just kept getting stuck in all these positions and these guys just, we're doing this and that and all that. And he goes, okay. Hey, what would you do to the Kyle from 6 months ago? And it just caught me completely off guard, right? Yeah. I'm like, I would kill that guy.
Murder him.
Then he goes, shut up. Like, we're all getting better.
Yeah.
Like, you've been training the last 6 months, right?
Yeah.
Well, so have all of us. And we were already better than you.
Yeah.
And so we're just better than you now.
Yeah.
It's like those gaps are just going to stay there. And that's where it's like, okay, that ego thing, that's got to die. Because that was all ego brooding in there in that locker room.
Well, it's a surefire way to drive out your ego.
Oh, gosh.
And then here's what here's my favorite thing about Double Five. Like when I travel, I take my gi with me now and try to drop in. And when I drop in, I kill people. Like it is not the same.
Isn't that a good feeling?
I mean, I love, like I've got vacation in Florida coming up in June and I've already found the spot, already emailed the guy, told Lauren, hey, a couple times this week, I'm gonna break away for an hour or two and get some. And I'm actually looking forward to that because I haven't dropped in anywhere yet where I get killed quite like I do at Formiga's joint.
And that's the best possible setup.
Yeah.
Like that, I feel the same way about the Forge in Edmond, Oklahoma, where I train. Like, luckily, the best jiu-jitsu gym in Oklahoma is the closest one to my house.
See, that's where I land. That's why I'm at. I've got friends that are like, why are you at a competition, bro? You're a competition. You're a 50-year-old man. And I'm just like, I didn't know I was joining a competition gym. It was just the one next to my house.
Well, and the thing is there are some competition gyms that are full of dudes that they're going to try to hurt you because they only want the strongest lions in the room at all times. And usually gyms like that don't survive very long.
Formiga wouldn't have it. Formiga would teach a lesson himself.
Right. You need hobbyists that are also nasty.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel the same way. Like, when I was blue belt or when I first got my purple belt, I'd have those bad practices, which still happen. They're fewer and farther in between now, but they still happen. But yeah, I would drop into an open mat, or I'd go to, I'd be in Louisiana for something, and I would take my gi. Well, there's no wrestling in Louisiana for the most part. And so just the fact that I have some takedowns, puts me in a different level. Going up to Utah, same thing. And you roll in someplace and you're like, oh, I'm so thankful for my gym and my guys. And you're thankful to have purple, browns, and blacks that 100%. Are letting you do little bit and not just smashing you the whole time.
That's right. Yeah. And then I also learned it in competition. When I did my first competition, everybody was like, you're going to be fine because you train here. You're going to be fine because you train here. And I was fine because I trained there. Right.
Okay. So I actually want to talk about that because Joby and I were talking so there are adult males that get into jiu-jitsu, but competing is just, it's nowhere on the radar, right? It's enough to get to class, to make sure your gi doesn't stink and that you remember your rash guard and flip-flops.
Yeah.
Like, that's enough. It is a different level entirely to compete.
Yeah.
And you told me the last time we talked about it, that you're trying to compete 3 or 4 times a year.
I'm going to try to do, my plan right now is to do Jiu-Jitsu World League in the fall and the Dallas Open IBJJF.
Yeah.
In the Dallas Open in the spring. So that puts me 2 a year, gives me something to train towards, and keeps pressure on me to keep going.
Hey guys, real quick. If you're anything like me, you are constantly on the lookout for high quality products that are actually made here in America by American hands. The problem is that a lot of American companies have outsourced their labor overseas, so it's an American company, but it's supporting people that don't live here. So I've always wanted to partner with an American company that prioritizes America, American workers, and making all of their materials here in this country. That's why I want to remind you that we are partnered with Origin. Origin is an apparel company based in Maine, and they are focused on getting as much manufacturing back to the United States as they can possibly do. What do they make? They make the best jiu-jitsu gis on the planet, and these are the only jiu-jitsu gis that are made completely in America. They also make jeans. Yes, they're stretchy and awesome. They also make amazing hunting gear, and I know you guys love your Kuiu and your Sitka, but those companies use overseas labor, and they don't do that to help you guys out. They do that to increase their profit margins. Origin also makes boots and work boots, and yes, that does include steel-toe boots. And in the fall of last year, they launched a line of everyday clothing. Their Versa pants are their everyday pants, and they are just especially phenomenal. They also make other outdoor clothes and workout clothes, and they're launching new apparel stuff all the time. If you haven't already, you need to check them out and support a company that supports America and America's workers. Try Origin out today by going to www.originusa.com. That's originusa.com. Use the promo code Undaunted to get 10% off of your order. Again, that's originusa.com. Promo code Undaunted to get 10% off of your order. So what I'm still not really getting, Matt, is the why part of it. Because when people look at you, because obviously, like, we'll talk about the Acts 29 conference here in a second, but I got to just watch you and Joby interact with people, and I would guess how far because I know you needed to leave the room. Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to guess over under 15 and a half feet is how far he's going to make it before he's going to have to stop and talk to somebody else. And so you have so many people that appreciate your preaching, appreciate your leadership of 829. They appreciate the books, right? So they were there from the beginning with the Explicit Gospel, and they've been there the whole way through. They listen to the podcast. They share stuff around. Like, you're kind of a big deal. You know that. You're a humble guy, but like, you've done stuff. Like, you've checked a lot of boxes that a lot of people don't get to check. Yeah. And so some people would be like, why open yourself up to potential massive disappointment where you train for 3 months for a tournament and maybe you get subbed in the first minute by the dude that goes on to win the whole thing? Like, why? Like, why go that far? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And to be really honest, I don't know that I know the answer to that question other than I am committed, one, to raging against the dying of the light. I want to be growing. I want to I want a new challenge. I think it's personality type stuff the Lord's put in me, whether it's theological or physical. I love learning, and I've actually grown, like I like I got out, I came back from a hard training session. I got in the shower and I don't know why, there's something in me. I love that moment where I'm in the shower and I'm like, oh wait, oh my gosh, I think I might have hurt myself. Right. It's even my wife, like last week, was like, what's wrong with, like, why are you doing? And I'm like, I love it. Here's one of the things I love. There's always 4,000 things going on in my mind. And jiu-jitsu is 100% presence. And right. Then like, I know guys that I've got a good friend in Tulsa, and he will, like, his sermons or complex issues, they come clear to him when he goes for a run.
Yeah.
He just goes for, I hate running. I'll never be a runner. I've run a couple 5Ks. If I don't hit that runner's high, which I think is make believe, by 3.2. It's
at the 6K mark. Yeah, so you've only ever gone to the 5K mark.
At 3.2 miles, if I hadn't hit it by then, I don't want it.
Okay, fair.
I don't want it. So there's something about being on the mat and being all on the mat.
Right.
Like, I'm not thinking about staffing complexities. I'm not thinking about how to move money around the world for Acts 29 in a way that we don't lose.
Right.
I mean, I am one, and there is a kind of clarity that when I get back in my truck, sweaty and exhausted, and drive home, I just, things start clicking for me. And then, man, it is probably my favorite. I need to be around grimy men who are trying to find their way. And my world can get really, really clean. And the church I pastor can get really, really clean.
The Texas suburbs, baby. It's the cleanest place ever.
But it's not.
Right.
It's on the surface it is.
It looks like it.
But man, that surface doesn't even exist in that gym.
No.
Because you've already put it. Everybody's equal on the mat. And then it has been such a fun, like when I finish rolling with most guys, I'm like, hey man, I've got some time this afternoon to pray. Anything I can pray for you about? I've had grown men that look like they would murder you in the street tear up when they talk about things at home or things about work. I need that space. I need to be around roughneck guys who are trying to find their way.
Okay. And so the thing that I love so much about that is, so I'm the men's ministry guy, right?
Yeah.
And so I will get people that are pastors at churches that'll be like, hey, Kyle, can you help us with the men's ministry? What they mean is, can we book you to come and speak at our once a year men's event?
Not gonna do it.
And then the rest of the year, we might try to get guys into circles. But what I've stopped doing, because I used to try to help people, Matt. I used to be like, okay, let's try to do this. Sure, bring me in and all. But my style is burn it down and walk away. That's my style.
Yeah, that's tough.
And so if you're not ready to do something with the ashes and the stuff that I burned off, like what?
Yeah.
So good. I got paid.
That's why I became a pastor. I was doing itinerant ministry. I'm like, I want to see what would happen if for 20, 30, 40 years, I like just walked with a group of people.
Right.
Like, what could God do if I gave 40 years to a spot?
Right.
And that's why I'm not traveling around doing itinerant ministry. I mean, I do that stuff, but I've got a home base. And like, even what I preached this morning is a mashup of 2 sermons I preached at the Village.
Right.
Like, I love this group of people. I mean, I told Andrea, my assistant, she was in the green room when I walked off stage last weekend, and I'm just like, I so love these people. I so want them to have all the fullness of Jesus in their lives. And I want that. I want to be there when it's on fire, and I want to be there when the Lord rebuilds it, and I want to be there when it catches fire again, and I want to be there when he rebuilds it all the way to glory.
Right.
And man, I love that. That's why I'm not traveling around preaching. That's why I've been in one place for 22 years.
And that's spoken like a true shepherd, because that's one thing that was talked about at the conference as well, to where it's like, we hear about shepherd and we only think about the soft parts of the job. We don't think about the parts where, they're killing lions that are trying to kill their sheep, kind of a thing.
And sometimes the lions kill, some of your guys.
Sometimes you're on the losing end of that.
Yeah.
But coming back around to the whole men's ministry thing, I stopped talking about men's ministry and I started saying, hey, how about we just make your church man friendly?
Yeah.
How about whenever you're preaching from stage that you have the men in mind?
Yeah.
How about your worship leader who is high in trade openness? That's very creative.
Yeah.
How about they think about the men when they pick the song and they don't pick one with homoerotic lyrics or in a key that men can't hit?
The key that men can't hit's huge.
Right. And so why are the men sitting there with hands in their pockets? Because they don't like the they don't like the music.
Yeah.
They don't like the words. It just seems funny. And when they try to hit it, they hear themselves not being anywhere near the correct key. And so again, you focus on it being man friendly, and that's like the main overall idea. But the biggest thing that I see as a problem with most men's ministries, Matt, is it's like, all right, well, thanks for coming to our Wednesday night, whatever thing. Hey, I'm going to talk for about 30 minutes and then we're just going to stick you in a group. And at that group, we got some questions and we're just going to just read those questions and pour your heart out.
Yeah.
Have you done anything with those men?
Yeah.
To where you would know that you could trust them, like anything at all? And I go back to hunter-gatherer cultures because it's easy to say, hey, men connect shoulder to shoulder, women connect eyeball to eyeball. Like that's a thing. But it's like, if we were going to hunt somewhere, we wouldn't be circled up before the hunt going like, oh my gosh, isn't this going to be so much fun? Like, let's make sure all our tools are ready to go. We would be stoically standing next to one another, ready for the hunt. And only after the accomplishment, after the kill and the provision for our village, will we get together and be like, hey, did you see when Bob tripped and fell over that rock? Isn't that funny? And like, man, Matt, that was a great shot. Like we needed that. We thought we were going to lose this animal. But the whole point that I'm trying to get at is we have so many people that aren't focusing on doing hard things together. And that's the thing with jiu-jitsu is you learn about somebody without them giving you their bio.
No question.
Right? Because you're learning about like, hey, I tapped you for the first time ever and you didn't just flip out. You smiled, slap bump, and we just went again. You learn something about these dudes that you're not going to get on the golf course.
I agree. I love it. Absolutely love it.
And so how can we, I'm kind of going to get into my men's ministry stuff because we talked about this at breakfast the other day. How can me as I guess you could call it a parachurch ministry, and you as a minister that is a sought after voice in a lot of different circles, how can we help churches not do men's programming, which that's what a once a year men's event is, but where they can focus on, hey, we're going to be man friendly, because if your church is man friendly, your men are going to be engaged. They're going to be catechizing their children. They're going to be volunteering. They're going to be looking for volunteer opportunities. They're not going to abdicate leadership to the women. Yeah.
So I think what I'm trying to do all the time at the village, in fact, I've done it multiple times the last couple of weekends. I was like, brothers, can I talk to you for a minute? Let me talk to you specifically. Like I know the onus of this text bears its weight on you in a unique way, but I also know the Holy Spirit's empowered you to do this, but you're going to have to move towards it and not from it. So I'm trying to almost always kind of speak directly to the brothers. And sometimes I will the sisters, but I'm like, men, like, let me say, because here's my experience now, 22 years. When I was a younger man, I just ran at them and beat them up. And there's some men need that. But by and large, my experience now is that a lot of men, if not most men, they want to do this right. They have a hunger to be the kind of man that you and I want them to be, but without models, without knowing what to do, they feel stuck in it. And so what I'm trying to do in this season of ministry, I'll be 50 in June, been at this a long time. I'm trying to embody what I'm talking about in a real way. And I'm trying to speak courage into them to take the step that they're afraid of, whatever that fear might be. Whether it's the imposter syndrome, like I just know I'm going to be found out to be a fraud, whether it's, like all sorts of, there are all sorts of kind of besetting issues that are on men right now. And I want to call them to what God calls them to. And I want to give them specific action to take. Most of the time, that's have courage. That doesn't mean you're not afraid. It doesn't mean that you're going to, God's not Jesus isn't a genie in a bottle that's going to make all your dreams come true, but he will be with you and he will empower what he's commanded you to do. So let's lean in, brothers. And I want to just speak to them as often as possible.
Okay. So let's talk courage. And now I've been having ants in my pants to talk about this, but let's talk about the Acts 29 conference. So
let's go.
So this is coming out the same week the new book comes out, which we'll get to. But that's where we've been hanging out all week is at the Acts 29 conference. I was down here in the Dallas area. And so it was kicked off by Joby Martin, who absolutely lit the place on fire.
Yeah.
And because I listen to all of his sermons now and have for the last several years. And so he went to the same well he goes to for a lot of his stuff, but he had to kind of set the tone for everything. And it was perfect. I was like,
absolutely.
It was a virtuoso performance by him. And I'm not just blowing him up because that's my buddy. And then you got Piper last night, and I got to watch you and Joby and everybody else just geek out at the fact that Piper was just in the presence of the room, and he absolutely lit it up. And then today you were going to come in and close. And so what I've experienced at a lot of conferences is the closer, for whatever reason, seems to try to ease everybody into the exit of the conference. They just kind of like, all right, well, you've had a lot of highs, and so I'm just going to be the calming voice that sends you off into the rest of the world. And so,
Yeah, that's not my gift.
no, that's not exactly your gift, but you're a firebrand.
Yeah.
We know that. If anyone's listened to your sermons, like for any length of time, like everyone already knows that. But there was something different today.
Okay.
From my perspective, from my opinion. And I felt like it's because not only did you believe what you were saying, that's why you said it, but you believe that we were in, I say we, I'm not Acts 29, but that the network, but even just the Western church writ large, is kind of at, not a breaking point, but we're coming to that Robert Frost fork in the road.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, you can keep going this way, or we can go this way. And the other way takes some courage and some gumption and some resilience and some fortitude. And I'm not going to give away your whole sermon, but you talked about remember and you talked about run.
Yep.
And it's like, remember, you're not the point.
That's right.
And remember King Jesus. But then when it comes to run, well, let me just tee you up to talk about the run part, and you can talk about whatever you want. But when you started talking about the run stuff, I was like, ooh, there's a lot of discomfort in this room. Like you could feel the weight of the room kind of settle on a bunch of people's chests, which again leads to, some reconciliation, which leads to healing and all that type of stuff. But talk to me about the run stuff and really just how you prepared your talk overall.
Well, man, I love that passage. I mean, that was one of the first 2 verses I ever memorized there in Hebrews 12. And the idea is like, if you're going to run, if you're going to be able to do what I'm telling you to do here, you've got to lay off everything that hinders that running. And then you also have to get the sin out of your life. You got to get sin off of you. But it's the first part that I think guys get jammed up in. It's morally neutral lesser loves that kind of satiate them from the feast of the presence and power of Jesus. And so, man, a morally neutral lesser love, it's not like what's making most guys stumble. Not all guys, but what makes most guys stumble. It's not black tar heroin.
Right.
It's flipping through Instagram and lingering too long on pictures that just happen to pop up on their reels because the algorithm knows they're a 30-year-old man.
Right.
And most 30-year-old men want to see what's coming up, and you start lingering on that. Now that's kind of sin. That's not even a hindrance, but you might not even mean that. You might be just thinking, hey, I'm just scrolling through Instagram. But those little decisions to be hindered by morally neutral lesser loves satiate you so you're not hungry for Jesus. So like having a glass of bourbon's great. I love a good glass of bourbon. I love it. What a gift of God's grace. But man, if that 1 glass turns to 2 glass, turns to 3 glass, turns to 4 glass, so you can get through the day, brother, you're not going to the well. You're not going to the well. You're running with a great deal of weight on you because you don't have the joy and life of Jesus animating and fueling the good work that God's given you to do. So a lot of guys are making it through life with white knuckle discipline, and I'm all about good discipline. But there is a delight and joy made available to the sons of God by which we're supposed to run. I'm running on the fuel of the joy of the Lord.
Okay.
Which is that's Paul, the joy of the Lord. I mean, right. That's Psalm. The joy of the Lord is my strength. Where's my strength coming from? The joy of the Lord.
Well, the thing that I found, I don't know why I found it surprising, but it was surprising, is you didn't leave it in the ethereal. Because it's one thing to tell everybody, hey, we need to have accountability. It's another thing to ask the guy next to you, hey, will you hold me accountable on this specific line item? But you actually put it in front of people to where it said, and I like the way that you put it, to where you use an example of this woman that was doing this commercial, and they had her stand next to a fully grown male lion, but it was a tame lion.
Yeah.
But then the lion realized, it remembered I'm an apex predator, and it mauled this woman almost to death. And the trainer was like, I've never seen this animal do anything like that.
I can't believe it.
Right. I'm in complete shock that an apex predator acted like an apex predator. What happened? But like you were talking about how some of you have allowed your own little cub, your own little private pet sin, as it were, grow into a fully fledged lion, and you still think you have it under control. No, you were at the behest of that animal
the whole time.
And when it decides it doesn't want to be nice anymore, you don't get a vote.
No.
And so I was actually surprised that you basically threw down the gauntlet with people and said, hey, if you've got a little cub problem, right? Like stand up so that we can know that we need to be praying for you. And the context that you put it in, and then I'll let you kind of talk more about it, was it's better that we have that awkward conversation.
Yeah.
It's better that we burn off like that dead wood. It's better that we do that now than for us to do that 10 years down the road. And what it's manifested in then is you have lost your family.
The
You've lost your marriage.
damage, the longer you put up with it.
And you're done with your ministry. Right. So why go there? Because a lot of people would, be like, we've got to be better, but they don't get real specific. You know what I mean?
So when I became a Christian, like Promise Keepers was at its height. I mean, stadiums filled with men.
Right.
And one of the guys that taught frequently there was named Steve Farrar. He went to be with the Lord, I think 2-3 years ago now. He actually would come to the village on Sunday nights back in the day. He was on staff at a different church in the area, but he would come. I think his son had a powerful encounter with the Lord at our church. And he wrote a book called Finishing Strong. And in the front of that book, he makes this claim. And by the way, I read this 20 years ago, 30 years ago. He made this claim that if you opened up the cover of your Bible and you wrote all the names of the men who are in the trench with you right now, within 20 years, half of those guys would be gone. Half of those guys would be gone. And at the time,
and not dead.
Not dead. Blow up their lives.
Right.
Blow up their lives. And I just thought at the time that sounded ridiculous. I mean, I was a young man. I mean, everybody around me was on fire for the Lord when I was reading that book, and we were experiencing the power and presence of God in our lives. And I was like, no way. And man, he was wrong. It wasn't half of them. It's been more than half. And so having been in ministry now, been following Jesus for 32 years, been in ministry 28 of that, the sheer number of guys that have absolutely destroyed their lives. Some have actually taken their own lives. 3 of them that I know of now. I feel that, man. I mean, I just feel, I want those guys to make it. I want them to make it in the room. I'm telling you, the reason I didn't come out and hang out last night is I felt burdened, and I didn't want to relieve myself of that burden.
Right.
I'd have come goofed around. We had a blast. We'd have laughed and told stories, and it'd have been epic. But I felt the weight of what I wanted to say, and I didn't want to let myself out from under it, because there's some kid out there today. I'm telling you, there's some 26-year-old kid, and he's just starting out in ministry, and he's still looking at porn, and he thinks it's okay. He thinks it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not hurting anybody. Or maybe he knows it's not okay, but it's got its hooks in him, man. It's got his hooks in him.
Better than heroin.
Yeah. And so he doesn't fear God like he should. He loves Jesus. I just believe it. I've seen enough to know there are guys who love Jesus and don't fear God, because fearing God keeps you from being stupid. It just does. You fear the Lord, you're not going to be prone to stupidity. You can love Jesus and be an idiot. Look at King David, a man after God's own heart.
Yeah, man.
What the hell's he doing on that roof?
He's a train wreck.
What's he doing? What are you doing up there?
Right.
At the time that kings went to war, why are you on the roof? Now, I've got a theory why he's on the roof. I think, so what I love about David, and here's what I try to teach men. Men need a king's table. They need a king's table. They need a Nathan who's like, you're an idiot, who's older, who can call them to it. They need a Joab that's like, what's that movie with Ben Affleck and where he shows up and he's like, hey, you can't ask me any questions.
The Town.
Yeah, you can't ask me any questions. I don't ever want to talk about it again, but we're going to go hurt some people. And he's like, whose car are we taking? Right? Yep. Whose car are we taking? You need a Joab.
That's it.
And here's the one, you need a Jonathan. You need a lover of your soul, man. You got to have that guy or those guys. Like you would call them your 3 a.m. friends, right? You need that guy. And Jonathan dies and David's lost. He's lost, man.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the lover of his soul anymore, and he's lost. And this is why I think brotherhood's so huge. And I push people. Like I can tell you my king's table right now. And I'm always, who's in this seat right now? And if a seat's empty, I'm going to find somebody to take that seat. So I had my Nathan seat empty a couple years ago, and I went to Ray Ortlund in Nashville, and I said, hey, I need a Nathan-like man in my life, an older, he's in his 70s. He's an amazing, deeply loves his wife. They're kind of gross. They feed each other. It's nasty.
That's a little much.
It's only nasty because they're in their 70s.
Right.
And man, the avid hunter, man's man. And I'm like, watch me from a distance, come in several times a year, and man, just be my guy that's helping me finish well. And then, man, if I lose a Jonathan or a Joab, I'm finding those guys.
Right.
I'm inviting them in, be this guy for me. I need this guy in my life. And I'm going to make space for that. And I'm going to cultivate it, and I'm going to give myself over to it, and when necessary, submit to it.
Right. And so in addition to that, this is one of the biggest refrains that I get. Because, the 3 a.m. friend thing went viral for the last couple of months, so people are getting it. But I talk about a foxhole.
Yeah.
Like, these are the types of guys, when you look to your left and to your right, these are guys that you want there. And it's not always guys that can fight, but you need some guys that can fight.
Yeah.
But, Joby and I were talking about in terms of like, Shane Bernard and Shane Efford, Shane and Shane. It's like, when you look at these guys, maybe you're not like, hey, I want you, with an M4 next to me whenever we're going that. But like, their music gets me ready to storm the gates of hell with a squirt gun. Like that's how that music is. So if I see any of the Shanes next to me, to my left or to my right, I am psyched. But these guys they'll lament. They'll be like, man, I don't have any 3 a.m. friends. I don't have any foxhole guys. I don't have any guys I can rely on. And I think they expect me to join their lament, which is not really in my like top 100 of personality characteristics.
No, it's not.
But it's like, so what do you think that you need to do about that?
Well, I said today in my talk, if you're a lonely pastor, you made that decision.
You chose that.
You chose it.
Yeah, I wrote that down. You chose that.
You did that.
And so part of it is we get higher on our own farts, and we're like, we are so important and so good. We don't have anyone that's on our level that we would want to submit to. So it's ego and all that type of stuff. But also, you yourself are not a 3 a.m. man.
Yeah.
And you know it. And you know that if a guy needs you at 3 a.m., that you wouldn't get out of bed. Yeah. You wouldn't get out of your warm bed to do it. And so that's where I tell guys that are like, okay, if they don't know any of those guys in their life, it's like, well, if you only hang out at church with a bunch of other typical church guys, you may not find the one that you're looking for. You need to go some places where there's some rough dudes. Maybe it's jiu-jitsu gym, maybe it's the shooting range, maybe it's something like it's somewhere. But most of these men are not cultivating that in themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought up this submission to authority thing, because the biggest problem that I see is you have those lean forward guys that are like, all right, I'm going to be a foxhole guy. I'm going to be a 3 a.m. guy. I'm going to be a corner toter. That's like Joby's language. I'm going to be that guy. I'm going to have a king's table. I'm going to be that guy, right? And then they have guys like that around them.
Yeah.
And the first time one of them tries to Nathan them, they reject them.
Yeah.
They say, you don't know me. You don't understand my situation. You don't know how hard my upbringing was.
Sure.
And then they stiff arm these dudes. And it's like, bro, you missed the entire point.
Yeah.
You did a bunch of preparation and then you stopped right before the war started.
Yeah, it happens all the time. So we read my crew, my 5. We read Gates of Fire by Stephen Pressfield almost every summer.
Right.
And the concept there of shield to shield, it's a mantra for us. Like that. I mean, the number of emails, like our little text thread, little emoji is 2 shields. It's this idea that I'm like, no, we're in this together. One dies, we all die. And so if it comes to it and the arrows are flying and blood's all over the ground, and it's because I dropped my shield, then I'd better be willing to listen, because it's not just me on the line, it's us on the line. Right. And we've just kind of adopted this mindset that we're going to finish this thing together. And I get it, man. I get where guys are afraid of this. I get where they're nervous about this. I totally get it. I've had to cross those bridges over and over and over again, because it would have been really easy for me to be king at the village. It'd be really easy to be the king and to lean on my gifting and to point to my anointing and, don't touch the Lord's anointed and all that bull crap. I mean, quit proof texting. And, but I have chosen by the grace of God. I won't touch it. I've chosen by the grace of God. I want to do this with a group of guys. I don't want to do this by myself. I want to, and here's what's great. When we win, man, the joy of winning is exponentially larger. And when we lose, it divides the lament across 4 other guys.
Right.
And it is I was just we do these, we all have chosen to do these mile markers for our children. So when they're 13 years old, we all gather together, husbands and wives. We gather in a room and we write letters to our kids. and we read out loud to them, this is what I see that God placed in you. Not, you're really good at football, or you got such a good person. No. It's like, so for my son, Reed, everybody said the same thing. You are fierce and you are kind. Don't ever choose between the two. Stay both. And then here's what's wild. When my son went through a little where he's second guessing himself, he was caught up, he was confused in some things. I literally pulled those letters out. I made him stand there and read them to me. And I was like, is Trevor a liar? Is Trevor, no, he's not a liar. Okay, so he sees it. Now what about Josh? Is Josh a liar? No, he's not, is it? What about Johnny? Is Poppy a liar? No, he's not a liar, is he? So this is in you. And I could watch, his chest came back out. So anyway, I say all that to go, we do it at 13 and then we do another one at 18. Writes a passage. And we were just at Josh's daughter's 18th. And we're all there. The room is packed. With this group, we've said, we're living and dying together. Like, we're doing this together. And man, we read our letters to Lily, and there's tears all over the room. Then we all gathered around her and we sang that Carrie Job song, The Blessing. And just, it sounded great just because God was in the room. It was just this powerful moment. And we could look at each other and go, this has been worth it. Every low, every high, it's been worth it. And I want that for guys. I hate that they won't choose to cultivate it, because you got to die to yourself to cultivate it. You just do. It's the only way to live is to die.
Piper kind of destroyed that ideology last night whenever he was talking about stoicism.
Yeah.
And the thing is if you mean stoicism as stiff upper lip, as Jordan Peterson would describe it, being the one man at your father's funeral that everyone can rely and depend on, like, that's fine. But if you take that ideology, that philosophy to its logical conclusion, because the point that Piper made last night is that's a stiff upper lip philosophy that also ends with sometimes there's too much on your plate and you just have to kill yourself, and that's also okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a minute,
Hold
like
on.
that, like how did we get there? And the problem that we see is that, and this is all tied to the stuff that we've talked about, like the little cubs that turn into fully grown up lions, and not having those people around you to where you can divide up your burden. Like, I want to talk about one specifically, because you talked about generically how men will blow up their ministries.
Yeah.
And right. And so it's more than half of those men are going to disqualify themselves. What's the sin that almost always is the sin that disqualifies a man? It's sexual. Almost always. Like, maybe a guy's like an embezzler, right? Maybe a guy's like a tax cheat, and maybe,
it's out there.
Yeah, like some of that stuff happens, and a guy that's just like, it's like he's a congenital liar. Like, it's like all he can do. But it's always a sexual sin. And as I've talked about on my show a lot, I used to look at porn and masturbate. Why? Because I'm a dude and that's what we do. And I had been convinced by a dumb buddy of mine that God gave us masturbation as a gift because, Jesus is my homeboy and God is okay with that somehow. And I have to have a release. And this is like this exegetical nonsense gymnastics that I have to get to make the text say what it says. Why is that? Well, the thing is I feel like I know why. I feel like I know that's the one, because the union of a man and a woman is the closest that we get to understanding the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross.
It's the picture.
Because that's him and his bride, right? That's Jesus and his bride, the church. And so obviously the conjugal union is one of those things to where it's like, if Satan, he's like, okay, if I can get them to do this thing that was meant for this one beautiful setting, outside of that setting, in any way, shape, or form that takes place, whether that's looking at porn and masturbating or whether that's having an extramarital affair, like, I win. Because if I can destroy this one building block, that's why the gay marriage thing was so important, is because it's like, if I can destroy this one building block by which we've built all of civilization,
I can pull the thread, I can unravel the whole fabric.
Right. We can get you to believe anything if we can get you to believe that, there is no sexual morality that you have to stick to. So I guess for that, to the men that are listening to this, that have that pet sin, right? Of porn. And hey, when I get married, I just won't look at porn anymore. I'll just be having way too much sex. Or
good luck with that.
Yeah, that type of idea. I mean, I know men that were looked at porn on their wedding night, right? Yeah. I know men that have asked their wives to hold the phone above her head with porn on it so that they can maintain an erection. And they're in their 20s, but they can't maintain an erection with a warm-blooded spouse that they have become one flesh with because they've allowed their mind to have one flesh, interactions with a bunch of other women. Just talk to me a little bit more about that, because my goodness, this is what's not just consuming pastors, it's just consuming men in general.
Yeah. So the sexual experience is a transcendent one. The closest we can get to transcendence without this intimate relationship with Jesus. And so there's a power dynamic at play, which is why like it's never really about sex. Like if you think about like the number of guys I know whose wives are absolutely stunning and the woman they cheat on them with is not.
Yeah.
Not. It's stunning. It's staggering. So it's not ultimately about sex. It's about control idols, power idols, and honestly, non-integration of your little boy self inside of you. It's a, can I be loved? Am I lovable? And it's a seeking of conquest to prove to yourself that you are. And then porn just is a cheap, easy way to get momentary transcendence.
Right.
And I've never met anybody who, when that act is over, is, feels empowered and emboldened.
We did it, guys.
There's always shame.
Right.
There's always shame and regret. And then if you don't have that, now, if you're to the place where your pants around your ankle and you've got to scroll for, you got to go to scene to scene to scene for 4 hours, even to go, like you have rewired your brain in such a way that, man, we've got some, and we've got a guy, man, I just met with a guy from our church whose wife just had their first baby, and this is his story. He gave himself over to this for years, and he marries this beautiful woman. And he has a hard time maintaining an erection because of all the porn he consumed.
Right.
And now he's doing the hard work. And by the grace of God, he's got this wife who's so gracious and understanding about it that he's healing and making his way. But man, it is a cheap substitute of the real thing, because the gift of sexual union is the Hebrew word is dode. It's a mingling of souls. It's not just a physical act. There's something there that's transcendent, because it is a picture of Christ and his church. And so when you short circuit that transcendence for a 4-second orgasm or whatever, you just do great harm to yourself, and you do great harm to the picture. And the picture is the only thing that's ever going to satisfy your soul. And so I think it's catastrophic. And it's interesting to note how science is catching up to what the Bible has said all along about the importance of taking every thought captive unto Christ, to whatever is true, noble, right, good, beautiful. Dwell on that.
Right.
Dwell on that.
It's 2 Corinthians 10:5, which got me through my addiction to pornography and masturbation. So Dr. John Fobert is a good buddy of mine. He wrote a seminal work called How Pornography Harms, and it gets into the brain science of rewiring neural pathways and how erectile dysfunction has skyrocketed for 20-something-year-olds, and how our testosterone is going in the opposite direction, and that gets into the food supply and all that kind of stuff. But I had a guy ask me a very pointed question, and I gave him a surprisingly pointed answer. He goes, "Hey man, why don't more pastors talk about porn and masturbation?" I said, "Because they're looking at porn and jerking off."
The numbers say you're not lying.
Right. And so it's like, that's why they're not doing it, because they've picked other varsity sins that they don't struggle with.
That's funny.
So they're not alcoholics, so they're going to rail on people that drink too much.
Yeah.
Like they're in good shape, so they're going to rail on people that have gotten a little bit lumpy around the middle, or the opposite of that.
Yeah.
They're not going to mention, overindulgence, because they've been overindulging for decades and not moving their bodies very much. But the thing I feel like a lot of pastors that do address this get wrong is they take the approach of making the issue seem like it's way bigger of a task to get under control than what it actually is. And what I mean by that is every year I do a How to Avoid Being a Crappy Man episode, and it's just, it's generalized good advice. Like, don't let sports ruin your night. Don't be late. Don't ever act like you know something that you don't, because you're stealing an opportunity away from somebody else to teach you something. Yeah. But one of those is no porn, no jerking off. And people are like, well, how do I stop looking at porn? I'm like, lean in. I'm going to give you some otherworldly advice. It's going to blow your mind. You ready? Get a pen. You ready? Stop looking at porn and stop jerking off. And they're like, it can't be that simple. I'm like, except it is. Because if I stop masturbating, I'm not going to go to porn because of the cinematography, because of the storylines. I don't need that tool anymore, because I've gotten rid of the act that leads to the use of the tool. Yeah. And it's kind of the same thing. Like I remember someone asking Jocko Willink back in the day, hey, I really struggle with pull-ups. So like, how could I get better at pull-ups? And his answer was, do more pull-ups.
Pull-ups,
yeah. Like that's how you get better at it. You get better at running by running. You get better at reading by reading. And it's one of these types of things where I feel like we overcomplicate it. And I'm not anti-accountability software. Covenant Eyes, great stuff. Triple X Church, awesome. The Lion browser, I'm all for it. But I think people do that as, it's like people that buy running shorts and running shoes and these specialized Brooks socks, but then they never go run.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's an element of that where people buy Covenant Eyes, but they know how to get around. They know how to get around that, because guess what Covenant Eyes can't do? It can't see what you're doing on the Twitter app.
Yeah.
Which allows you can see anything on the Twitter app, right? And
Listen,
so I think
you can get to almost anything through and here's what I learned by having kids. You can go to the Bible app and get to YouTube. You can get from YouTube. You can get to, and maybe we shouldn't be giving away hacks, but I'm guessing the brothers watching know.
Well, that's the thing is, I'm glad that we gave away the hack to where it's like, hey, if you're listening to this, that's something that you have to get under control. But I guess my point, Matt, is I feel like we're making this too complicated for men, because it goes back to what you said earlier in this conversation at your sermon you did at Acts 29, and what we talked about at breakfast the other day. Is men want to be better, but they don't know how.
Yeah.
But men are actually kind of simple. Like if you give them a 3-step process to do something, they can probably make that work. But if you give them this kind of vapid, like 12-step process to be able to this and that and the other thing, it's like, dude, just stop doing that thing. Just stop it. And I just feel like we way overcomplicate. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, I think you're right. I do think there are times where, there have been certain kinds of trauma that really make it a bit more difficult for certain men rather than others. Like a guy that's been sexually abused, or a guy might have some more work to do than just a guy who stumbled across a magazine when he was 12 or something like that. Right. And so there is a category for complexity, but by and large there is I know when I do this, and I'm going to make sure that my King's Table or corner carrier knows that, man, I know my wife's going out of town. I know I'm on the road this week. And so I'm telling my guys, hey, and I still do this. This isn't my struggle. I've got my own compulsions. This isn't one of them. And if Lauren's out of town, I'm letting my guys know, hey, Lauren's out of town.
And they know what that means. And these are my guys. So I'm going to get a call at around 7 that night. How's things going? What are you watching right now? And I'll be like, man, I'm watching this. And then I'm going to get a call about 9. Yep. What are you doing? I'm like, it's funny you should ask. I'm working on this, or I'm doing this. Get another call at 10. When are you going to bed? I'm planning on going to bed here in a little bit. And that's not that's what I've asked them to do. And because we're shield to shield, we're making it. We're going to get to the end of this. Yep. And so if Josh lets me know Natalie's out of town, man, that's a serious thing for me. That's a serious thing for me. And he does something. I love this about Josh. Every night when him and his wife get in bed, he reaches over, he puts a hand on Natalie's shoulder and says, I've been faithful to you today in mind, body, and spirit. I've been faithful to you, mind, body, and spirit. He does it every night. And I'd love that practice. I don't do that. I think Lauren would be like, I'm trying to sleep. Okay, great. Thank you. But we have committed to one another, and we know where's the enemy come at us? What are our compulsions? If it's a crappy day, how might I respond? And we know that about each other. And we have freely shared that. And so they know my compulsions, I know theirs. And in an environment where I might be weaker than normal, they know it, and they're there. And there've been times where Lauren's out of town, great, let's all go to dinner. Right. Let's all go to dinner. Let's not let you just sit around the house by yourself for 5 hours, because that sounds dangerous. There you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my interview with Matt Chandler. But before we let you go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. So here are the links I've got for you today. I've got a link to his new book called The Overcomers. We get way more into that in part 2 of this. So again, come back later this week for part 2. So The Overcomers is there. I've also got a link to all of his other books, because he's written a lot of other books. So I just have an Amazon link so you can check them all out. And then a link to the Village Church website and the Acts 29 website. Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. That's info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming your way. Just go to www.Undaunted.Life. And also, we want to thank the band Holy Name for allowing us to use their music for our content. The music on this podcast is their song Perpetua, which is off their self-titled debut album on Face Down Records. The links are in the description. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.